A radical new motor oil that's very important for people that have cars with the modern engines in them. The new oil is going to be called GF6, and it's really important for people with those GDI, variable valve timing engines that a lot of modern cars have, the little 4-cylinder engines that put out as much horsepower as a V8. Take the Hondas. They've had a problem with oil dilution, where gasoline was getting past the piston rings, past the lubrication, and diluting the engine oil, which leads to engine damage. And other GDI engines have had carbon buildup, timing chain problems where the timing chains wear out prematurely. Well, that's what this GF6 oil is made for. Make sure you look at the label on a can of oil, because the label explains it all. As you can see on my bottle of Castrol here that I use in this old car, you go by the service label. This says API service SN. SN, SM, SL, and SJ. How the quality of the oil fits your engine. And you want to research your own engine to see what you're supposed to use. GF6A and GF6B. And here's the difference between those two. The GF6A is going to be backwards compatible, so you can use it for any vehicle. That's what they're going to say you should really run your cars on, so they pollute less, have less engine wears. That'll be the GF6A. And the GF6B, that's going to be only for those modern engines that need the 0W16 oil, which in itself is hard enough to find these days, because that is a relatively new oil, and a lot of stores don't even sell the stuff. Now, this new GF6 oil has to meet 8 new parameters that the old oil didn't meet. The first one, sequence 3H, requires that the oil be 33% better, stopping oxidation and deposits in the engine. This is especially for those GDI engines that build up deposits more. Then it has to meet sequence 4B, which means it has to have improved valve train wear, so the valves and the cams and everything don't wear out too early. And it has to meet sequence 5, reduces varnish and sludge inside the engine. Now, this is very important, and of course it's historically important too. On the early engines, they just used oil they had lying around, and after it got dirty, it would build sludge in the engine to destroy it. So then later they came with detergent oils. The detergent oils contain detergent, which keeps all the sludge in suspension. So rather than clog stuff up, it gets in the oil and floats around, and then when you change the dirty oil, the sludge goes out with the dirty oil. This is just a further improvement of it to keep sludge and varnish from building up. Varnish is the real big problem in these GDI engines. They have a tendency of running hotter with all that pressure and turbochargers throwing stuff in, so it has to meet that specification. Then the new GF6 oil has to meet fuel requirements so that they get better fuel economy. It requires 19 to 39% better fuel economy. The less viscosity, the less friction it is. That's why they've gone to 0W16. Sequence 6F, which is another fuel economy thing. It requires that these oils meet a certain minimum fuel economy in a test. Then there's sequence 8, another test, that requires that these oils do less corrosion, that they keep more corrosion from occurring inside the engine. Then there's a sequence 9 test that it has to meet. Prevents corrosion. It's a test that they've been doing for years, and they're just making the test more stringent for this new oil. And last but not least, there's sequence 10. It says that they have to have less timing chain wear, which is a big deal in these little bitty engines that put out a lot of horsepower. The engines are spinning faster and faster. Generally, they have at least 2 overhead cams, if not 4. They have variable valve timing. You do not want chain wear to wear out earlier. Now, when I was a young mechanic, the timing chains generally lasted as long as the engines did, unless you went 300,000 miles and it finally wore out. They were bigger, thicker chains. Check out this old Chevy timing chain. It's thick, it's strong. The new ones are tiny compared to these, so they need more protection. Plus, they're also spinning faster. So really, why are they making this new specifications, GF6A and 6B? The oil has to evolve, just like it did in the past. Originally, cars used oil that would sludge up. Then they made detergent oil. But even then, most of the cars didn't even have oil filters to filter stuff out. We had a Ford, didn't have an oil filter on. It was a Ford Fairlane, had no oil filter. We would just change the oil in it every 1,000 miles. Then they added oil filters, started making various different viscosities for different usages. They're upping the ante again and making an oil that really is much higher quality than the old stuff was. And it's a real change for the better. I remember they started changing the oil change intervals. And I asked an engineer once, okay, we used to say to change it every 3,000. Now you're saying 5. What's the difference? Well, back then the engineer that I talked to said, well, Scotty, we have to make them more eco-friendly. So we're telling you to change the oil every 5,000 miles now. I said, well, did you change anything? He said, no, we didn't change anything at all, except the mileage we told you to change it at. Well, these modern oils, the GF6, they do have a lot of modifications to make them better, having better additives, making the base more pure so they have less wear. Because back when I was a young mechanic, you could rebuild an engine for $200-300 really. But today's modern engines, you'll go anywhere from $3,000 to $20,000 rebuilding some of those fancy quad overhead cam 24 valve. You don't want those engines to wear out prematurely, and coming up with this better type of oil is a good thing. And I suppose, like everything else, when it first comes out, they'll rip everyone off and charge way too much for the oil. But when you consider what an engine costs versus what the oil costs, you're going to be better using this oil than any of those modern engines with GDI, variable valve timing, turbochargers, small 4-cylinder engines that put out a lot of horsepower by revving faster. You want to use this new GF6B oil in those, the ones that require the 0W16 oil. Realize that the GF6B should only be used that call for the 0W16. If they don't, you can use the GF6A because that's backward compatible. Use whatever the manufacturers suggest. Revving your car's engine can actually make it run better. Now, I'm not talking about sitting in your car with it just idling and then you rev the engine up and rev the engine up like you're going to do a burnout or something. That's not good for your engine. What I'm talking about is driving it at higher speeds for extended periods of time. In the olden days, we used to call it an Italian tune-up. We old mechanics still call it an Italian tune-up. And for those of you who've never heard of it, an Italian tune-up is driving your car fast on the highway for a while to clean everything out. Now here in Texas it's easy to do because between San Antonio and El Paso there's a stretch of highway that goes 544 miles and the speed limit is 80 miles an hour. Now you don't need to go that fast as long as you do it for an extended period of time. I find anything from an hour to 2 hours driving at that speed really helps clean your engine out, makes your vehicle run better. Now generally you're not going to pay a mechanic like me to drive your car on the highway for a couple of hours since it's $100-something an hour. And anyway, I'm still 3.5 hours from San Antonio, so it'd be a long drive. I do it using the pressure cleaning system. Here's the canister. It unscrews. The cleaner goes inside here. Then you put the top back on. Whee! Hanging on the hood like an IV drip at a hospital. Hook the feed end up to the fuel injection system. In this case, you bolt it onto the fuel rail because Toyotas don't have any kind of a Schrader valve where you can screw a Schrader assembly on. You have to hook it up to the fuel rail. Then I get my air pressure line from the compressor and hook it up. And in this case, I like cleaning them the fastest and the best. So what I do is, I pull out the fuel pump fuse so the fuel pump doesn't run. And then, with the pressured air here, that pushes the cleaner into the fuel injectors, and it's running on 100% fuel injector cleaner. And that's where a system like this works a lot better than you pouring cleaner in a gas tank. Because if you pour cleaner in a gas tank, it's all diluted. It's only going to work so much. With 100% cleaner, you'll do a better job cleaning all the carbon out of the engine. Now, odds are you're not going to have an air compressor. You're not going to buy this pressure system and a cleaner and do something like this. But when you do go on the highway and drive, say, 70 miles an hour for an hour and a half, a couple hours, steady speed going somewhere, that will help clean out your engine and make it run better. Especially for people that do a lot of stop and go city driving and don't do anything else. I've got elderly customers here, grannies, who are still driving, and they say they never go more than 30 miles an hour. Now that's not good for a car because the engine isn't spinning fast enough. And to add insult to injury, if you're only taking short trips like 3 miles to the grocery store and back, the engine isn't even reaching operating temperature for very long, so things can get clogged up inside the engine. Now you have to understand that no machine is perfect. When you burn gasoline, that's hydrogen and carbon basically, in Earth's atmosphere, that's nitrogen and oxygen and trace elements, you get all kinds of end results. from the burning of it at high pressure inside the engine. Now the piston rings are supposed to seal all that mixture from going into the crankcase where the engine oil is and then just blow it out the exhaust, but of course no machine is perfectly efficient. So some of these gases and byproducts, especially water vapor, which when you burn gasoline it gives off a lot of water vapor. That's why you see them steaming in the winter when it's cold outside out of your exhaust. Carbon gets created. A lot of that will blow by the piston rings. Even in a new car, nothing seals perfectly. That's why the oil gets dirty, and if you smell it, you'll smell it smells different when it's been there in a while because there's generally a little bit of gasoline dilution that got in it. And no valve seals for the valves are perfect, so gases and oil get sucked into the engine. Nothing seals perfectly. And if you don't drive at high speeds to evaporate all this stuff, especially for longer periods of time, you get a buildup of water and different things in the oil, and you get a carbon buildup on the engine because it's idling so low that it doesn't go fast enough to really burn everything off. In this respect, cars are kind of like racehorses. They like running fast every once in a while. You don't want your racehorse car to turn into a big old fat horse lying in the field eating all the time and not exercising. You want to keep it lean and mean. And when you're driving at higher speeds on a highway, everything's heating up, and you might not think it, but gasoline itself is a very good cleaner for your engine. Going fast, that gasoline burning through it fast and getting nice and hot, that's often just the ticket for a car that isn't running perfectly. As an example, we used to have a Toyota Camry station wagon. My wife was a teacher at Houston Independent School District, and she'd drive back and forth to work in it. And I mean, it was only 2 miles from here, so it was a 4-mile round trip. And I mean, it was a Camry, so it ran decently, but we decided we were going to see the Alamo in San Antonio. So we drove to San Antonio and back, and that's about a 3.5-hour trip each way. So we're zooming along the highway. We couldn't go 80 because the top speed was 70 going out to San Antonio. You had to go past San Antonio to get 80, but we were doing 70, 75 the whole time, there and back to Houston. And this was all done in the course of one day. Here in Texas, people like driving. The next week, when my wife's driving a car to work, she said, "What'd you do to my Camry? Boy, it's running so much smoother. It's idling so much smoother. It has more acceleration." So I told her, I said, "Well, you know, we just went to San Antonio and I was driving 70, 75. We did an Italian tune-up on the car while we were driving it." Now, granted, if you're the type of person that drives your cars hard a lot and are on the highway all the time, you don't need to do this. You're already doing it. But the vast majority of people these days, especially here in Houston, they do a lot of stop and go city driving, and when they do get on the highway, they do a lot of stop and go highway driving because there's gridlock here all the time, especially during rush hour. So it's actually worse if they drive from Houston, say, to Humble, and they're going 35 miles. They might only be going 5 miles an hour doing that. So that's even worse than stop and go city driving because it's mainly stop driving and not too much go. Now, as I say, as a mechanic, I don't have time to do that to other people's cars. You do it to your own car. I use this pressurized fuel injection cleaning system, and it does a pretty good job, but I mean, you gotta buy it, you gotta have an air compressor, you gotta buy the cleaner, you gotta really know what you're doing. Because these cleaning systems use strong chemicals, you gotta know which ones to use. And even then, often, it will trip a check engine light because it's running with pure cleaner, and a lot of times, that'll make the engine seem to be not running correctly. It'll trip a code for the computer. I have to reset all that after I'm done cleaning it, and this takes about an hour to do. Where if you're just going to go on a trip and take your car on the highway, hey, you don't have to mess with wondering which chemicals are correct to put in your gas tank or to try to inject into the engine. You can just drive the car at a good rate of speed, and it'll clean itself while you're driving down the road. Now, of course, be logical when you do that. If your oil's all dirty, change your oil and filter before you do it, because then it'll have a better ability to clean everything out. Especially if you got an older car that's somewhat worn. When you put the clean oil in and do that driving, you might find that after you do check your oil, it might be getting dirty already, which is a good thing, because that means the detergent in the new oil is collecting the dirt and stuff that's in the engine. And if your car was really messed up and you changed the oil and filter and it got real dirty quick after doing it, then of course you would change the oil and filter again to have clean oil inside. All modern oils are called detergent oils because they have detergents in them that help clean things up. And what the detergent does is it keeps the crud in suspension. So when you change the oil, the crud goes out with the dirty oil, and doesn't build up pockets of sludge like it did when I was a younger mechanic. And engines would just be full of sludge because they had non-detergent oil, and the sludge would just build up everywhere because the oil wouldn't pick it up and carry it around. So if you're hankering to do an Italian tune-up driving on the highway for a couple hours, hey, first make sure the oil filter's clean, make sure your air filter's clean, make sure your spark plugs aren't all worn out, because you want to do this with an engine that's already set up for a tip-top run. Because if you've got an engine that's got bad spark plugs, dirty oil, a clogged air filter, an Italian tune-up is not going to fix your problems, because it's never going to run right during the Italian tune-up on a highway, so it's really not going to fix anything. Now, the whole idea of Italian tune-up is proven by the guys in those big rigs in the 18-wheelers. Generally, most of their driving, the interstate ones especially, is on highways going at highway speeds. That's how those engines can run good, and sometimes they can go 1,000,000 miles. All the wear and tear that happens in stop-and-go city driving doesn't happen on highway speeds. The engine's cleaning itself out, and of course those guys have a bigger advantage than most people in gasoline cars. They're all diesel engines. Well, diesel fuel itself is pretty much of a lubricant. If you take gasoline, pour it on your fingers, you'll feel they can clean crud off. Pour diesel fuel on, you'll see it's slimy because it's got more lubricant qualities. So diesel engines, hey, they're even better for going long distances because their diesel fuel is a lubricant, which is yet another reason that diesel engines can change their oil less frequently. Because if gasoline gets into your engine oil, even small amounts, that reduces the lubricant qualities. Where diesel fuel, it's a lubricant in itself. An Italian tune-up of revving your engine up higher on the highway, driving it for a certain period of time, can actually do wonders for how well your car idles and accelerates. And you can do sort of an Italian tune-up locally if you want. Just keep your car in lower gears. Let's say you're going 70 miles an hour on a highway, look at the RPM, say it's doing 3,000 RPMs. You could drive in town and put it in a lower gear. So even though you're going 30 or 35 miles an hour, you can set it up so your transmission is going 3,000 RPMs, and it's doing basically the same thing. Then it's making the engine spin faster, it's cleaning all the stuff out. It's actually better on a highway because then you got more wind. But, I mean, in a pinch, you can help it out somewhat by putting it at higher RPMs when you're just driving in town. Here I've got an easy repair anyone can do themselves. In this case, it's a 2017 Kia Forte. The check engine light's coming on, it isn't running right. We'll open the hood, but thank goodness the check engine light is on. So rather than guess, we'll use a computer. I hooked it up to car, as you can see. It says PO301, cylinder 1 misfire detected. Now unfortunately, these PO codes are what are called generic codes. Lots of things can make an engine misfire. Could be the spark plug. Could be the ignition coil, could be the wiring, could be the computer. And just don't think it's ignition system. You got a bad fuel injector, that can make a car misfire. Gasket, intake gasket, head gasket on number 1, that can make it misfire. But the absolute simplest thing to do is this. First, we'll take the stupid beauty cover off, get it out of the way, and here's the ignition coils. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now it says number 1 is misfiring, so we're going to take that out. You just unscrew it. Sometimes they're hard to get out, so you wiggle them and unplug them. In this case, it's a dual system. They have to make it harder than normal, so you gotta click it up, then squeeze it to get it off. It won't come off if you don't push that up. The number 2 ignition coil. Get that out, wiggle it, pull it off, get the screwdriver, unlock the tab, there we go. Then we flip it over and squeeze it, off it comes. Then we'll do a simple test. We'll put number 2 in the number 1 hole, and number 1 in the number 2 hole. Put the bolts back in, you gotta make sure they're lined up. They gotta line up with their hole, and get them snug. And remember to plug them in. This one plugs in here, snap, this one plugs in there. We'll leave the top off, it's just a stupid beauty cover. Then we'll just push reset on the scan tool, and that resets it so there's no codes. Then we'll take it for a little drive. Well, I drove it around, the light came back on, so that's good. Now we can check it. So we'll plug the working end in again. Here we go. See what it says. Here we go, it's gonna read it. Well, it's got one code, and the code is P0301. Misfire cylinder number 1, so it's not the coil because it's still not firing right. Well, guess what? Now we're back to square one, but at least we didn't waste any money. We swapped the coils, but the misfire stayed where it was originally, so it's not the ignition coil. So put the coils back, take the other one off. So we're going to check the spark plug, and lo and behold, the spark plug is loose. It's not in tight enough. We're going to check it out anyway. It doesn't look bad, but who knows? Since this one's loose, we're going to check them all, and I'll probably replace them anyway. Take them all out, see if any of them are loose too. Stick them in the spark plug holes. These are a little loose too. And put it all back together and see what happens. Make sure I put them in the right holes. This is the green one, that's number 1. And now we're missing one. There it is, there's number 2. Then we'll hook all the cables up. 1, 2, those we didn't unhook, and then we'll bolt them all back in, all 4 of them. We'll start her up again, see what happens. Well, it's running good now, so we'll take it for a road test and see what happens. And now I'm back, it's running fine, no check engine light. I did put in 4 new spark plugs, the old ones had gotten loose, but it's got 80,000 miles, so I put in new spark plugs, no more misfiring. And you might wonder, why did it only have a misfire on 1 cylinder and not all of them if the spark plugs were worn out? Well, even though it's a machine, things don't necessarily wear evenly. In this case, the number 1 spark plug got looser and wore more than the other spark plugs did, but you're going to change them all. Don't go through the trouble of guessing here and there. Change all 4 of them, make sure they're nice and snug so they don't get loose again, and it won't have misfires. In this case, just a misfire on 1 cylinder, not on the others. Eventually you probably would have done them all, but we want to fix cars, so when you fix them right. If one's bad, change them all. Now, one of the most annoying things is your car's running okay, but you go to get it inspected and it fails the test. When we plug in the old scan tool, and any scan tool will read this, even a $20 one, it shows it's got PO100 mass volume airflow A circuit. And here's how that circuit works. This is a mass airflow sensor. Inside it, little electronic part. It measures how many grams of air flow into the engine per second, and then tells the computer how much fuel to send to the fuel injector so the car runs perfectly. So let's open the hood and find it. Here it is, right here. Bolts on here, snaps on here. Now if we look closely, we'll see there's no frayed wiring or anything. Sometimes the wiring gets frayed. Sometimes that's the problem. Sometimes you can even clean them with mass airflow sensor cleaner. You want to use just this because it leaves no residue. But I've been working on these things for years, and I know when it gets that particular coat on a Nissan, it's a problem in the circuit. It's not dirt or anything. It's not running rich or lean. There's a problem in the circuit. And from my experience in these, it's always the sensor itself is just wearing out. Now, if you feel lucky, you can take it out and clean it. I got a whole video on cleaning it. Make your car run better with a little spray cleaner. You can watch that in once if you feel real lucky. But with this particular coat, there's a problem in the circuit. And from my experience, there's only 3 things that can do that. A bad sensor, bad wiring, or a bad main computer. Now, I've looked at this wiring. I don't see anything frayed, and where it frays is always at the end where the sensor is. I see them where they get brittle, where they come apart. I'm going to unsnap it just to make sure it's not corroded and green though. So we'll squeeze it and pull it off. And let's look inside. As you can see, it's pretty well sealed with these seals. Everything's shining metal. There's no corrosion there. When we look inside here, it's kind of dark. It doesn't look bad, but I gotta take it off and inspect it in the sun. So we'll unscrew this. This is all one piece. We'll just unbolt the air filter box and pull the whole thing off. Out it comes. Now, as you can see in the sunlight, this is crystal clean. Not dirty, no problem with that. We're just going to replace it. Easy job. Just take the bolts off. It's a lot easier doing this once you get it off the car. All kinds of working room here. Even that one's kind of tight because that's in the way. Isn't that typical? You take all those off. And normally you got to measure which way it goes so you don't put it backwards. It's got a little marker on here and it says airflow goes this way. But in this case, you don't have to worry because one end bolts on, the other's different. So you can't put this one on backwards. A lot of them, both ends are the same, and you could put it in backwards, it wouldn't run right. But this, it only bolts on one way, so you don't have to worry with this design. And here you want to use a new one. Rebuilt ones, you never know. This is brand new. It's already got a new gasket, just bolts on. Get all 4 bolts on, and make sure they're all tight. Get them nice and snug. You don't want any air leaking past it. Then flip it over and do the other side. It's important that you have an airtight seal because this is all filtered air. You don't want non-filtered air with dirt in. That will ruin these things. These are hot mass airflow sensors. When you shut the car off, it burns any impurities off these wires by getting them glowing red hot. If you get any dirt on that, it'll make it burn itself out. Just like if you touched the filament of a light bulb with your greasy hands, it'd ruin it. So make sure it's nice and tight. Then we put it back on. First thing, slip it over the rubber. Then when that's slipped over, put the air box in its place. Make all the snaps click. Realize there's ones up here too, and one you can't even see on the other side. But you'll hear it click when I hit it. There. Then we just tighten up the clamp. Get it nice and tight. You don't want air leaking there especially. And while you're at it, go to the other side, follow it, make sure everything's solid. Make sure that's all bolted on tight. It is. Okay, then we go back inside. And what we do is, with the scan tool hooked up, we will turn the ignition key on. So the key is on, the idiot lights are on, but the car's not running. Then we go to the code reader, go back, and what we want to do is erase codes. So we'll go to diagnostic codes up here, erase codes, yes. So we click yes, guess we got to click it twice. There. Then we enter, turn key on with engine off, enter. Now it's erasing the code. You have to erase it because if you fix it, eventually it will erase itself, but they could take a while, and this is instantaneous. You can see now it says there's no codes, but we don't trust anyone, so we'll go back. We'll go back to read codes, and let's see what it says. No codes found. So now it's reset. And now comes the easy, boring part. We just start it up. And let it warm up. We've reset it, but cars have what's called a drive cycle. And in order to pass the emissions test, it has to go through the drive cycle. So we're going to take it on a highway, going 55 miles an hour or faster, then drive it in town a little and see what happens. What we're going to do here is we're going to go to special functions. As we do special functions, it's quite interesting. We want the global OB2, and what we're going to is the drive cycle monitor. And as you can see here, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 incomplete monitors. So I'll restart the car, and we're going to watch these. Now there's only 4. It's already reset one. Those vehicles, it'll pass inspection that it has to have just 1 monitor incomplete. There's 4 now. But this is an old car. It's a 98. And back in those days, you're still allowed to have 2 incomplete. So we just have to drive it until there's only 2 incompletes. Then we can get it inspected. And as I said, you got to drive it on the highway a while at 55, 60 miles an hour. So here we go. And wouldn't you know it, I got a road testing going fast. Here I am in a massive traffic jam in Houston. Isn't that just typical? Just realize that sometimes it takes a while, especially these older cars. Drive it and watch the monitors until it's down to 2. Well, now it's getting down there. And hooray, now it's down to 2. We can go back. Now, as I said, most modern cars, when they're 2000 or newer, you can only have 1 mil not ready to pass the test. But this is a 98, so with 2 mils not ready, it will pass the test. Okay, now there's only 2 mils not ready. That means this particular one in 98 will pass the test. But we got to make sure one thing. We're going to go back, diagnostic codes, here we go, and pray it hasn't said any while we were driving. So here goes nothing. Read codes, no codes found. That means it's going to pass the emissions test, and we succeeded. Hurrah! To show you how to fix a car that isn't idling correctly. This Mercedes runs okay going down the road, but when you come to a stop, it's shaking, wiggling too much. You can tell it's not running right, but it hasn't yet tripped the check engine light, and being a professional mechanic, I hooked my giant $5,000 scan tool up and found 56 different codes, none of which are related to the engine idling. They are anti-lock brake codes, communications for the airbag codes, lots of weird stuff, but nothing that would make it run weird. So we got to start from scratch here. Idling is the most crucial part of your engine when it's working correctly, because everything has to be perfect. It can be off a bit when you're going fast and still run okay, but when it's idling, it's got to be perfect. You got to have the right amount of air, the right amount of fuel, and the right amount of ignition power to the spark plugs to make the engine right. So always start with the basics. First thing we're going to check is the air filter. Take all this plastic stuff out of the way. In this case, it has 2 air filters. one on each side. And of course, being a Mercedes-Benz, it has to use one of these stupid fancy sockets, in this case, TP20 socket. So you unscrew all the stupid bolts to hold it in place. I got a little carried away here. And off it comes. And they're filthy. So we're going to change them. Now this baby has 2 spark plugs per cylinder. It's a V8, so it's got 16 spark plugs. So let's check the spark plugs. It's often near impossible to get these off, so we'll have these pliers, stick them in and wiggle them. Then we got one off. Then we'll use a spark plug socket, wrench, and see what they look like. Hard to get out. They've probably been in here a long time. Babies are in there, finally. And as we can see, there's a lot of corrosion on it. These babies have been in a long time, so we're going to change them out. Now we got to do 16 of these things. What a pain in the butt. Mercedes-Benz in their design. Ford tried that dual spark plug years ago and they gave up with it. Heck, they even used that stuff in World War II. They may think they're high-tech, but they're still pretty low-tech when it comes to a lot of things like that. Old school. Get them nice and snug. They get up and then a little tug. Then you snap the wire back on. Sometimes it's hard to find. There's not much working room. There it goes. Now to get to the rest of the spark plugs, you gotta unbolt the coil pack here so you can reach them. Otherwise, there's no working room. So you unbolt all the coil packs and get them out of the way. Now, of course, once you've done the 8 on the one side, we got to do the 8 on the other side. This baby is a pain in the behind, but at least it's exactly the same. Now, finally, we got all the spark plugs in, all 16 of them, and the coil. And as long as we're here, let's look around for any vacuum leaks. This thing is 15 years old, looking for cracked plastic parts. You can see there's been cracked stuff that's been JB welded back on. A lot of plastic stuff break on these old ones, but we're looking for vacuum lines and stuff that might have cracks or the rubber that's leaking. Well, I don't see any in this 97-degree heat. I'm just going to put the filters on, start it up, and see what happens. Filter just goes back in, screws on this side, line them up, and bolt the stupid things back on. Awful long threads on these babies. And this one, even dirtier than the other one. Then you slip the whole thing back on, back where the air goes. Then slip the sides on. One there, one on this side, and stick the rest of the stupid beauty cover on. Then we unlock it and start it up. And here we go, we come to a stop and it's idling smooth as silk. All the shaking's gone. So now you know how to stop a shaking car from doing the shimmy while you're idling. A very common problem in modern cars. An oxygen sensor system. Now all modern cars use a variety of oxygen sensors. Technically, this is an air-fuel ratio sensor. These things screw into the exhaust system and they measure indirectly what kind of gases are in the exhaust to make the car run perfectly and not pollute. Now this particular car's got 4 of them on it. In this case, it's tripped a code to check engine light is on. In this case, it's P0051, heated oxygen sensor, heater control circuit low bank 2 sensor 1. The sensors send feedback to the computer. They can be affected by if your car's running rich, lean, if you got a bad catalytic converter, if you've got bad fuel. There's all kinds of reasons that they can trip codes for just the sensors. This is a Lexus, a Toyota product, and they have a known problem. Inside these stupid little sensors is a heater, kind of like your hairdryer heater. And that's so that when you start the car, immediately it heats up and it works efficiently at lower operating temperatures when you start the car. And these stupid heaters inside those sensors break down all the time on these. Now the car can run perfectly fine, this thing's running perfectly fine, but you can't get your car inspected because it's got that code for a problem with the anti-pollution system, the oxygen sensor. So in the case of this Lexus, the most logical thing to do is to just change out that sensor. Now it's called Bank 2 Sensor 1. Well, there's 4 of them on here. How do you know which one that is? Well, here's how you tell on any engine. This is a V8, so there's 2 banks. There's Bank 1 and Bank 2. Well, Bank 1 is the side of the engine that has the number 1 cylinder, and Bank 2 is the opposite side. So in the case of this Lexus, the driver's side has the number 1 cylinder, so bank number 2 is the opposite side, the passenger side. And the code was for Bank 2 Sensor 1. Well, Sensor 1 is the sensor before the catalytic converter. So it's the first one off of the exhaust manifold. Jack it up and see where it is. This thing is so low to the ground. You gotta jack it up to get under it and look at anything. And we don't want to be squashed, so Out goes the jack stand. Now we go under the car. You'll see, you really can't see anything because all this plastic crap is in the way. So we got to take some of the plastic crap out of the way so we can work on it. So we'll take a bunch of these off. And now when we go up here, we can see the oxygen sensor right there. There's the front one. If we go back past the cat, there's the rear one behind the catalytic converter. But we're changing the front one. That's in the front. Now the first thing you have to do is disconnect the clip. And it is a stinker. You got to squeeze and pull. But eventually, as you can see, I've got that end unplugged. It is a real stinker. These are one of the worst design plugs on the planet. I don't know why Toyota makes these. They're absolute scumbags. Yeah, they're real easy to put together because they click on, but they're almost impossible to get off. You just have to keep squeezing and squeezing until they finally click and snap off. Now, when we go back to the other end here where the oxygen sensor is, you need an oxygen sensor remover tool. You'll never get it off otherwise. The tool itself just slips over the sensor. Then it's on there. And you put a ratchet on it. Here's a better shot where you can see it. There's the wrench. And you put a ratchet on that and pull on it. Here's the ratchet with a long arm. Fits on it. And you just... and it comes off. There it is, and once it's loose, you can just get your hand and it'll spin off. You can see it just spins freely. You just keep turning it until it comes off. There it is, we got it out. Then you just get your new oxygen sensor and screw it in the hole. Up it goes. Just screws in by hand, you spin it in, and once it's spinned in, you put the wrench and get it nice and tight. There it is, it's down, inside, in. Now you want to make it tight because you don't want it leaking. And of course, fish the line through here so that you can plug it into the other end and click it in. Now as you can see here, it's a one-hand job clicking it in. There it goes, click. They're very easy to put together. They're hellacious to take apart. Then of course you got to bolt all the stupid plastic crap back on. And voila, we'll just let it down and take it for a road test. Down she goes. And as you can see now, the check engine light is off. All those lights went off. So the next time your car has a problem with the oxygen sensor system, now you know what to do. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.